Welcome to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. We're applying the mind of Christ to the matters of the day so that you can connect the eternal with the everyday and get ready to head out into the world that God so loves in ways that honor Jesus. So let's get started. This is The Reconnect.
Inspiring you to bring God back into the conversation of the day.
This is The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms out wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power we will go. By your spirit we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
Hello, my friend. I'm Carmen LaBerge. You're listening to The Reconnect on this Monday, the 6th of July, 2026. As we acknowledge and celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America, or at least the declaration of our independence, many people are revisiting the founding ideals, the documents of the nation's founding. I think that's a really good exercise. I think if you wanted to go back and you wanted to sort of read some of the things that like Samuel Adams wrote, Samuel Adams was called the father of the American Revolution for his role in championing independence, even long before it became popular. And he really focused on morality. He's like, liberty will not long survive the total extinction of morals. He was really lamenting, wishing that his neighbors, that we would be a more religious people. He believed that the people of Boston would be free no longer than they remained virtuous. In 1779, he wrote a letter basically prophesying that the general dissolution of principles and manners would be more surely overthrown than the whole force of a common enemy. I mean, basically what he's saying is if people aren't virtuous, then liberty can't be sustained. As we lose our virtues, then we are also ready to surrender our liberties. And I think that is worth considering today. What does that look like? And so over on my Substack, I have a reflection on the measure of a nation. I'm just going to read a portion of that to you. If you want to, my Substack is free, so if you want to sign up, we'll send you the link. It's just carmenlaberge.substack.com. And I'm just asking the question of how a nation is to be measured. What's the measure of a nation? Because we're, 250, we're all like celebrating that. I mean, is that even significant in terms of history? Is the length of an existence of a country, is that the measure of a nation? What about its impact? What about the impact of a nation, not only on its own people, but on the world? I mean, by that measure, the United States of America is a whole lot more than the length of her days. Right? We have a tremendous heft in terms of our global influence. What about accumulated wealth? Maybe inventions. What about military might? How do you measure a nation? Which, of course, leads me to wonder, how does God weigh or measure a nation? On what scale is God measuring us? And then what would God's measure of America be today? So the Bible uses metaphors of scales, balances, measuring lines, plumb lines to show that God evaluates nations based on his perfect standards of justice, morality, humility, and ultimately viewing human power and even superpowers as insignificant. So God's not judging physical or economic wealth. God evaluates the collective moral weight of a society. That's the measure, the moral weight of a society. So when compared to the vastness of a creator, you could think about the power and prestige of earthly kingdoms, and they amount to nothing. In Isaiah 40:15, literally called a speck of dust. Surely the nations are like a drop in the bucket. They're regarded as dust on the scales. God weighs the islands as though they are fine dust. 2 verses later, Isaiah 40 verse 17 emphasizes that before God, all nations are, quote, less than nothing, emptiness. So if you were going to talk about a divine balance, like to test the internal integrity or a nation's rulers and its people, maybe you would look at the way God measures Babylon. Daniel 5:27. During the famous writing on the wall incident, the prophet Daniel tells the arrogant King Belshazzar of the Babylonian Empire, "You have been weighed in the scales and found wanting." The nation was judged deficient in moral substance and subsequently fell, in fact, that very night. Proverbs 16:11 says God uses absolute standards when he measures a nation. Quote, "Honest scales and balances are from the Lord." God applies a single unwavering standard of truth to all geopolitical entities equally. In the Old Testament, God often uses construction tools like as architectural metaphors for precision testing before bringing destruction or restoration. Think about the plumb line in Amos 7. God sets a plumb line, a tool used to see if a wall is perfectly vertical. He uses a plumb line in the midst of Israel. It's a metaphor that indicates that the nation is like warped. It's warped away from God's moral law. It's no longer straight. Measuring line is also described in 2 Kings 21. God warns a corrupt Jerusalem, quote, "I will stretch over Jerusalem the measuring line of Samaria, the plumb line of the house of Ahab." Let me just say, you don't want to be measured by those things. You don't want to be measured by God or judged by the judgment that God has used against wicked regimes. Scripture outlines specific societal metrics that trigger God's judgment. When one is found to be unfaithful with the blessings or the benefits, the favor or the work of God. Jeremiah 22:3, nations are consistently measured by how they treat orphans and widows and immigrants and the poor. Ezekiel 28, empires like Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, they're brought low primarily due to their hubris, their belief that they are the authors of their own success, that God has no role, no reign over them. How about Micah 6:11 and 12? When a nation's economic and legal frameworks are built on structural dishonesty and violence, God declares their scales to be wicked. Earthly empires, whether empires of antiquity or modernity, are portrayed throughout the Bible as inherently fragile. Eventually they all, yes, including the one that we call America and love so much, eventually they all come to an end. The only kingdom that endures forever is the kingdom of God. So while 250 years is a good long run for a kingdom of this world and there's hope for a runway ahead, we would be foolish to think that we're not being weighed, measured by a very different set of measures than simple endurance over time. As Christians living in America today, I think it's our duty, those who enjoy incredible freedom and the rights of this land, I think it's our duty to participate in elections, to raise our voice, to organize, to influence. We have agency and we have opportunity, unlike many Christians throughout time and in many places around the globe. Like, we are free. And so I'm grateful to be a citizen of these United States, and I cherish the rights that many fought and died to protect. And there are many ways that we might evaluate America using God's standards of righteousness and justice. And when we do that, I think we have to be honest and say we fall short. And so I think that part of our role and our responsibility as a believer living at this time under this government is that we would live as people who use our freedom not as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God, 1 Peter 2:16. I just want to encourage you today. Our first allegiance is to the kingdom of God. We are his. That's our primary identity before any other. And we get to live freely here in this particular kingdom at this particular moment in history. And I want us to use that freedom well in service to God, to the glory of his enduring kingdom, the one that is ultimately good, the one that endures forever. So in our 250th, what's the measure of our nation by God's measure? How is God measuring us. Our friend Elizabeth Neumann is going to join us next, and we're going to thank God for his good protection over this holiday weekend, and we're going to do a little terror assessment. That's up next here on The Reconnect. Our friend Elizabeth Neumann is back. She's the author of Kingdom of Rage, The Rise of Christian Extremism and the Path Back to Peace. She's also a security analyst and she formerly served all of us as a member of our national staff related to Homeland Security. Elizabeth, welcome back to The Reconnect.
Good morning, Carmen. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have not talked in a few weeks, and I wanted to ask you about like what we know now, how you kind of evaluate that plot to attack the White House, the UFC Freedom 250 event back on June 14th. Would love for you to just sort of riff on that for a minute.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk a little bit about what we know from court filings. This was an investigation that began when one of the mother of one of the plotters contacted police. I have to tell you, when I read that, I just was like, yes, this is exactly what we need the public to do. It is so hard for a family member, especially as you can imagine, Carmen, like a mom, to report on their kid. But that's exactly what we need family members and loved ones to do. If they see something concerning in their loved one's life, call police and let the police do the investigation. And it most likely will save your loved one's life. It most likely will save others' lives. So that's what happened in this case. A mother called the police. The police began investigating and interrogating the individual, a guy named Tyson Proper of Danville, Ohio. And it turns out that he had been coordinating with quite a number of people. A total of 23 people have been identified as having participated in pre-operational planning, that they had organized themselves into tiers. They had attackers, they had drone operators, they had people doing logistics and funding, relatively sophisticated. If you think about most of the attacks we've talked about over the last few years, they tend to be lone attackers, not groups. And those groups that we've seen haven't been this sophisticated. I'm just going to use a broad brushstroke. When you read the indictment and the court filings, your eyebrows do get raised. Like, oh, they actually had some pretty interesting operational security. They had segmented themselves pretty well to try to pull something off. Now, I think there's more to come. Anytime you put something in court filings, the investigators are trying to make their case why these were bad guys and why they should be locked up, right? So it needs to go to court. There's an element here of questioning whether these guys would have been able to pull off what they were trying to do. But it's really, really important that the Secret Service and the FBI were able to stop it before they attempted anything. Now, what were they attempting to do? Here was the alleged plot. They were taking, the plan was to take explosive-laden drones to hit buildings near the event. If you remember, this was the UFC event on the South Lawn of the White House. It was being held on June 14th. And they were planning to basically create a distraction with these drones, having explosives on them, force a mass evacuation, and steer the fleeing crowd towards a pre-staged sniper team. And that's when the real attack would have happened, a second wave attack, if you will, where the snipers would have tried to kill what they called high-value targets. We don't actually know who the targets were, but we do know a little bit about their alleged motive. The individual whose mother turned him in, Proper, told investigations that he intended to jumpstart a revolution in the U.S. Others seem to be more focused on anti-Semitism, anti-government sentiment among the plotters. There were grievances about government corruption, the Epstein files, data centers. One suspect said the goal was to target capitalist elites, billionaires, or politicians who'd received AIPAC donations, AIPAC being the American Israeli Political Action Committee. And so what you see here is kind of quintessential right now what the threat environment looks like. It's an amalgamation of a whole bunch of grievances. It doesn't necessarily cleanly line up to a traditional anti-government extremist or a traditional anti-Semitism or a traditional white supremacist. It's kind of like all of it. And it all kind of gets lumped together. And in this case, thankfully, we have the Secret Service and the FBI able to disrupt it. There was, I don't know if you picked this part up, Carmen, there was a little bit of controversy in how we came about knowing about this. It was the Monday after the event, FBI Director Kash Patel posted on social media that they had this case and they had people arrested. And the Secret Service put out a statement kind of batting down Kash Patel saying, yes, this is happening, but because we think it's really important to be able to investigate and hopefully prosecute these individuals, we're not going to say anything more. So it was kind of a backhanded slap. Hey, let us do our investigation. Don't rush out and tell the public everything that you know about the investigation. This is not the first time that Kash Patel has kind of jumped the gun. He probably most famously posted incorrectly about who he thought the attacker was in the Charlie Kirk assassination. He also made a similar premature person of interest claim during the Brown University shooting last winter timeframe. So he has a tendency to just really be out there and trying to. I'm sure it's a bit of rah-rah trying to promote his agency, which any head of agency needs to do. But he has a tendency to step on the investigation and cause challenges when you're trying to go to court. So that was a little bit of the controversy. And of course, when he posted immediately, people are like, all right, I'm skeptical until I hear from the actual investigators. And what we now see in court filings, what we see from the Secret Service is this was a very serious threat. Again, I'll repeat, we don't know if they had the intention and they were definitely doing pre-operational planning. We don't know if they had the capability to carry this out. There are a lot of people out there that say a lot of things and can't actually pull it off. So there's a capability piece here. I don't want to panic everybody because this is the kind of sensational plan that is quite alarming. But that's why we have these layered systems in place. As I read their plot, I am aware of certain capabilities that we have in the government that would have made it very difficult for them to pull this off. They don't know that because we don't tell the public about all of our defensive capabilities. But I'm very reassured that the Secret Service and the FBI, the professionals there, did a great job of stopping this attack before they could attempt it.
Yeah. I as I was reading about it and hearing about it, I was thinking just how clearly it aligns with what you've been teaching us over time in terms of nihilistic extremism. That sort of like, it's not like a group of people who all agree on even what they're upset about. And then the developing of an online community that gives people this sense of belonging and purpose. And I just felt like, wow, the stuff that you've been training us on over time comes into real view here. We got to take a brief break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Elizabeth Neumann. What are you thinking about? What questions do you have for Elizabeth? The text line is open, 877-933-2484. You're listening to The Reconnect. Hey, I really like it that you listen whenever you want, wherever you are, at all times of the day and night. That is so cool. So thank you so very much for all the ways in which you support this ministry with your prayers and words of encouragement. Right now, in order for this podcast to be available everywhere all the time for everyone, I actually need your help. Could you support this podcast right now so that more people in more places at every hour of every day could hear about Jesus and grow in their relationship with him? Click the link in the show notes or give now at myfaithradio.com. And thank you so much again for listening to this podcast. Surveying some headlines just this morning, the Washington Post reporting, having completed the celebration of America's 250th, President Trump is testing how far he can push NATO allies. The New York Times reporting deadly Russian strikes rocking Kyiv on the eve of the NATO summit. Our friend Elizabeth Neumann is here with us. She's a security analyst. Let's talk, Elizabeth, a little bit about the NATO summit. The president is headed off. He's hoping to bring an end to Russia's war with Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, it's normally when presidents go to the annual NATO summit, it's not big news. But of course, in this administration, the president has taken sizable steps away from our NATO alliance. He's drawn down troops, he's drawn down funds. Some of it, at times, it seems like it's an effort to convince NATO that they need the countries that make up NATO need to be contributing more to their own defense spending. And some, I think history will say, hey, that strategy has somewhat worked. We are seeing more countries put forth more funds, more people into their defense. The French leader Macron, in particular, has called for Europe to recognize that they can no longer depend on America as their protection against a provocative Russia, against potentially other harmful adversaries like Iran. And so there's an element of this strategy that has worked to their credit. I do, however, have a concern that the narrative there requires we can't depend on America in order to get them to do that spending. And maybe there was no other alternative, but it would behoove the United States to return to some sense of stability and being able to be depended upon by our allies. And that lack of consistency and that volatility that we have exhibited over the last 18 months has definitely created concerns across our allies. And I think there's an element of, in the first Trump administration, that instability, most allies were like, well, this is just a blip. This is 4 years. And then we had Biden, and then things go back to normal. Having this Trump experience for most Europeans, as well as our Canadian, Australian, New Zealand partners, they are definitely, there's a mind shift now. I do continue to spend time with people that I used to work with when I was in the government in those countries, and they definitely see the world differently, and they are taking more responsibility for protecting their own citizens, and I think that's a really important thing. But there's also an element of the United States is not the partner that it once was, and that makes me sad. So I am looking to see how Trump carries himself in the NATO summit, if it's going to be as it has been in the past when J.D. Vance was overseas in the last two times he was overseas. There was a bit of wagging a finger at Europe and a bit of talking down to. So I'm curious if that's what we're going to see from Trump, or if maybe Trump will be more of in his deal maker mode of what can we do together. And ultimately, I think top of mind for everybody at NATO is wanting to see the Russia-Ukraine situation resolved. It is in a standstill right now. There are some arguments that some defense military experts have made that if we could provide Ukraine a little bit more resources, I don't mean we, the United States, but just the West in general, could provide Ukraine more resources. There is an element of Russia has just been beaten down. They've lost a ton of resources as well as people, and that you might actually be able to complete this thing, to finish this thing, but those resources haven't been provided. And so it's a bit of a stalemate. And neither side is backing down. Trump has, in the headlines, has indicated he had a call over the weekend with both Putin and Zelensky separately. And they seem to think that they're going to be able to solve it this time. I'm a little skeptical. I don't see any major changes in the dynamics at play that would lead either side to adjust their position. So I think absent an influx of resources to Ukraine, I don't know that we're going to see a resolution to that conflict anytime soon.
It's not lost on me that Turkey is hosting this event, and that Erdogan, who I think fancies himself as the most significant politician of the day, sees himself uniquely positioned between Western democracies and the Middle East, and certainly between Russia and everyone else. So he's an interesting character, and he's not a person, who I personally celebrate. And so it's just interesting to me that Turkey's hosting the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So,
it is, Turkey in particular has a whole host of rich history, both biblically as well as in the future prophecy. And I'm with you on that, Carmen. It is kind of a unique. I don't know what is. I'm watching with anticipation. Maybe that's the way I should put it. It makes my eyebrows.
Maybe the next time we talk, there'll be more for us to reflect on, because we'll be able to look back over our shoulder at what happened at this NATO summit. I think that'll be good. Yes. Thank you for joining us. Happy summer, happy 4th, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Carmen. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. That's Elizabeth Neumann. She's a security analyst, former member of our. I just think of them as our national staff, people who serve us in the country as a part of any given administration. She happened to serve in the Bush and in the first Trump administration in Homeland Security. Her book is Kingdom of Rage: The Rise of Christian Extremism and the Path Back to Peace. And she's her finger on the pulse of what's happening in sort of in security things around the world. She's also a Christian sister, and I just love to talk with her. It is summer. Maybe you are thinking about or engaged in summer school. Maybe you're gearing up for another school year. It's already past the point where we're school's going to be happening again. It'll be here before you know it. And so we'll talk with Dr. Corbin Hornbeak next. He's the president of the University of Northwestern St. Paul and Northwestern Media. We're going to talk about a trend called degree hacking. Have you heard of it? I hadn't. That's up next here on The Reconnect. I went to college. Took me 4 years. Then I went to graduate school. Took me 3 years. Have you heard of degree hacking? Most college students take, 4 years to earn a bachelor's degree, additional time if they want an advanced degree. I'm looking at an article featuring Christy Williams. She finished in 3 months. Yeah. Dr. Corbin Hornbeak is here with us. He's the president of the University of Northwestern St. Paul and Northwestern Media. Hey, Corbin.
Good morning, Carmen. It's great to be back here with you. Happy July.
Happy July. It's the middle of the summer. The school year is coming. Enrollment is up. We want to celebrate with you, things like that. And I know you're getting ready at UNW for the arrival of students. What does that look like? And then I want to talk with you about degree hacking, because I didn't know anything about it.
Me either. Well, let's talk about it. That'd be great. I look forward to that.
Okay, so I'm looking at this article from the Washington Post. It's called Degree Hacking Trend. And so this North Carolina human resources executive spent 2 months racking up credits through web tutorials. And then she raced through 11 online classes in 4 weeks. And then she went back to earn her master's degree, and that just took her 5 weeks. And those 2 degrees cost a total of just over $4,000. So, and since then, she's coaching other people to learn how to, quote, speed through, quote unquote, college. Okay, I just want to say that's not college. I don't think that person went to college.
Yeah, I read this article, Carmen, and we might be tempted at one level to be impressed with the the ingenuity or the willingness to figure out how to sort of beat the system. And there is this trend in our world today, and I think I have some thoughts on where this might be coming from. But there is this trend to see how fast and efficient and inexpensively we can do this thing called college. And I think at the end of the day, we're not talking about college, as you said. We're talking about something entirely different. And we're putting slapping the label college on it, or we're talking about higher education in some form of that. But and I think we've confused the two. Now, there is a value in this world for getting some skills and some training and the ability to be able to apply those quickly in some workplace settings. But that's entirely different from what we think about in terms of higher education and certainly Christian higher education.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about relationships and like formation. I feel like there are things that take place when you go to school, when you go to college and or when you go to graduate school, the relationships that you form and the way that it's not just about information, it is about formation. Yeah. And you form relationships, but you are also like formed and shaped as a person.
It's since we just celebrated the 4th of July and America's 250th anniversary from the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I thought I would go back to something that John Adams said in one of his speeches. And I think it pertains so importantly to how we think about education and the word you just used, formation. And he says this regarding America and our democracy. He says, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people." I'll just say that again. Our Constitution, which we're celebrating, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So when we're thinking about our responsibility, and go back to the founding of our country, and you think about the colleges and universities that were launched at the beginning of our nation, the Harvards and the Yales and Princetons, the purpose of higher education was not to hand out a certificate or a piece of paper. It was to form leaders. It was to form men who were capable of launching this experiment that our country, that forms our country. And so if we're primarily interested in getting information into people, we can do that. We can do that really fast. We can do that through all kinds of online programs and training, and some of those things are helpful and useful. But if we're talking about forming people, and especially forming people who are morally grounded and religiously formed, and particularly in the Christian religion, that comes with you can't do that in 3 weeks and $4,000. That just it's a different value proposition altogether.
I think that's actually good language. It's a different value proposition. So what's the value of a collegiate education? What's the value of an education that's going to be not just information, but formation and transformation? And I think that when we talk about, I think we have to start talking about higher education, particularly in the Christian sphere and circle. We need to be talking about formation of individuals. We need to be talking about relationships, and we need to be talking about transformation, not only of those individuals, but ultimately of the society of which we are all a part. Because I think that the value proposition needs to be a Christian higher education may cost you more, but the value of it is so much greater that it's worth the investment. And so I think that every time we circle around and we're like, well, how much of a reduction in, how much can we cut the cost? And I'm like, well, just because you're, do you see what I'm trying to get at? Like, we need to say this is actually more valuable than going to community college. This is more valuable than getting a degree online. There is a value in being a part of a living, breathing community of people where you are being formed as a Christian. Yeah. Like, it's a thing that happens when we're together.
You know, you are so right, Carmen, and the scriptures offer us some incredible illustrations, examples of why this is so important. We've talked in the past on this show about, you know, some of my heroes in the Bible. Daniel. Now, take Daniel, for example, or Paul. Daniel was trained in the language and the literature of the Babylonians. And that was part of God's plan. That was part of God's design. That was part of God's sovereign script for Daniel. And it was a rigorous program. Daniel was selected to enter this rigorous program, and it probably wasn't particularly fun, and it challenged his faith. But when you look at this influence that Daniel had, he served faithfully under 4 kings, 2 Babylonian kings, 2 Persian kings, all secular, godless kings, and yet he had incredible influence. Take Paul, for example. Paul was trained in some ways the opposite way. He was trained in the school of Gamaliel in the Jewish tradition, and yet God placed him in places like the lecture hall of Tyrannus in Ephesus, and God placed him in Athens on Mars Hill to have conversations with the Stoic and Epicurean philosophers of the day. So when you think of is the idea and the goal just to get as much information in yourself as fast as you can? And if so, what's really behind that is so that I can better my position in this world. I can, get the training I need to get the job I need to get the promotion I need. But you're not thinking about shaping or influencing the world. And the responsibility that God's given us in higher education, and particularly Christian higher education, is to form leaders. To form leaders, men and women, who will influence this world, that will understand the ideas that underpin the world that we're living in, to understand the direction of the world that is headed, to understand the secular ideology that's in the world, and be able to take the ideas that are embedded in the Christian faith that come straight out of the Bible and be able to have a transforming, I think of a leaven working its way through the whole batch of dough in our society. And that's what we have. That's our responsibility to give back, not just to take.
We're talking with Dr. Corbin Hornbeak. He's the president of the University of Northwestern St. Paul and Northwestern Media. If you've got contributions you'd like to make to this conversation, the text line is open, 877-933-2484. Walt has checked in on the text line, Corbin, and Walt says the value of Christian education, priceless. So we're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. When you think about the way that your identity is formed, the formation of you as an individual, and then the information that you have received, and all of the ways that you receive information, and then the way that you are transformed by the active work of the Holy Spirit in your life, and even reformed. I think of the Reformation, the times and seasons during which we individually, but then also corporately, need to take a fresh look, let's say, at the Word of God and say, hey, this standard is different than the one that we are currently living. So formation, information, reformation, transformation. We're talking about the way that people are, making it all as efficient and cheap and easy as possible. So degree hacking was our jumping off point. But how has this got you thinking about your own formation as a disciple? Again, text line's open, 877-933-2484. You're listening to The Reconnect.
Psst, have you heard the news? Listening just got better with the new and improved Faith Radio app. No more restrictions, no more static, no more missing your favorite shows. Now, listen when you want, where you want, and share with everyone. When you need hope, encouragement, Jesus, it's right there on your phone. Text the word app to 877-933-2484 and follow the link or search Faith Radio Network in your app store.
Is the classroom neutral ground? Back in the day, we actually thought of educators as the curriculum. That person is the pattern after which our children are going to be formed. And so we thought about the person who was standing up there in the front of the classroom as the exemplar, as the person that we wanted our children's lives to be patterned after. And then along the way, education became the content of a curriculum. And we began to imagine that it was about banking a certain kind of information into the heads of kids. Well, classrooms are not neutral ground. Like, education is not. It's not making sure all the bubbles are filled in correctly on a sheet of paper. A person is being formed by another person. And so Dr. Corbin Hornbeak is here with us today. We're talking about education. We're talking about Christian education, Christian higher education. Corbin, what are your thoughts in terms of when we look at what's happening maybe in the culture writ large? I do think that what's happening in our classrooms,
Yep.
I mean, Sunday school as well. Like, people aren't going to Sunday school anymore. So, like, there's an educational, there's a way in which we just sort of, I don't know, fell asleep at the wheel or gave it all over to the secularists or something, but we got to reclaim it.
Yeah. There is it's something that every single person that's listening and every one of us needs to understand is that we are all disciples of something. We're all being trained. We're all being formed. And the question that we have to ask ourselves as Christian is, who is training us? Who is forming us? Who is our teacher? What are we disciples of? And if we're honest with ourselves and we look carefully at what shapes our worldview, what shapes our understanding of the world, what shapes our response to the world, we have to approach that question with a spirit of great humility, because many of us have been deeply, deeply influenced by an increasingly and rapidly increasingly secular world. Whether we admit it or not, we may say that we hold on to the fundamental truths of Christianity, but look at our lives, look at how we act, look at what we say. And, we keep coming back to scriptures that are so important, maybe even more important in today's world. Romans 12, that so many of us are familiar with, where Paul says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. We've used that word several times this morning. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then, Paul says, then, after all that happens, then you'll be able to attest and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So we are not going to be equipped or able to reclaim ground in this world until we have gone back to school ourselves, where we understand what God is telling us and teaching us through the scriptures, until we truly become disciples of Jesus.
I remember a conversation I had. I mean, this goes back maybe 20 years with a young woman who said, "I think I'm an accidental feminist." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" But it led into a conversation of like, she says, "I've been deeply influenced by the water I've been swimming in." Mm-hmm. Okay, that is true of each and every one of us. Right. And so you might be listening right now, and if we were really to put you to the test, you might be an accidental socialist. You might be an accidental communist. Like, you might say to yourself, like, I don't really know. I don't know enough to be able to tell you that I hold firmly to the original values of these United States, because that's not what you were educated in. Right. You don't know what it means to be a Christian or an American, or go down the list of identity qualifiers, because you didn't have a civics education, and you certainly didn't have a Christian civics education.
Carmen, you're so right. And so the moment that somebody stands up at a podium and offers people something like free education for all, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want somebody else to pay for your education? And we have to be wise about that and recognize that nothing is free. There is no such thing as free education. It comes at a cost. It might come at the cost of our souls. And so when we're talking about educating people, and we should be praying for our teachers, because I know many of them are getting ready to go back to school in the fall and already thinking about their classes. Education was never intended to be free, and it is costly, but the value, and I love what our friend texted in, it is priceless. We work very hard to keep the cost as minimal as possible, as low as possible. But our aim and our goal is not to provide a cheap or free education, because that would not be valuable. So we have to continually come back to that place to say our responsibility is not to lower the cost to zero. Our responsibility is to influence the world we live in with a biblical Christian worldview.
Yeah, Anne is on the text line, and she says that their family is attending Sunday school, and Sunday school classes are overflowing, and it makes me wonder, like, what is being taught and who's doing the teaching? Like, how is the value of Sunday-based Christian education? Like, how is that? Why is it thriving in that location and in that place? And I want to celebrate that it is.
Amen.
But I also just want to recognize and acknowledge that's just not true in a growing number of congregations across the country. I also think that, as I sort of survey, even in my own community, it feels like quote unquote vacation Bible school is not as, I'm going to use the word popular, certainly not as prevalent or readily available as it used to be. And I think part of that is people started treating it as like some sort of like free drop-off childcare program. And it's not. This is a discipleship program. Yeah. And if it's not being reinforced at home, it's really, really hard for churches that want to be transforming the lives of young people and then through them the culture writ large, if who's being dropped off has no formation whatsoever in terms of Christian faith and life. So, All right, we've run out of time, Corbin. Not surprising.
We could go on forever. I love this.
We could. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We look forward to the continued conversation in the future. That's Dr. Corbin Hornbeak. You can connect with him at the University of Northwestern St. Paul. You can find UNWSP at unwsp.edu. You can also get there from myfaithradio.com because, we're all a part of the same body. Hey, yes, the World Cup is tonight, quarterfinal round underway. I will be cheering with you for Team US. We'll catch back up with each other tomorrow here on The Reconnect. If you missed any portion of this program or want to share it with somebody else, it's going to be posted in just a few moments as a podcast, thanks to the diligent work of our producer, Paul Perot. Couldn't do this work without him, and so such a great partner in ministry. All right, my friend, have a great day. God bless. Thanks for listening to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. Let us know how we can help you more fully reconnect the eternal with the everyday. We want to walk with you throughout your journey of discipleship, so let's connect. You can text us at 877-933-2484 or connect with us online at myfaithradio.com and on all our social media. I look forward to connecting with you as we each seek to reconnect the eternal with the everyday.